They killed the emperor in a palace corridor, and then they went looking through the rooms, not for treasure, for a replacement. They found him behind a curtain, an awkward, stammering man who thought his turn had come. It hadn't. They put him on the throne instead, and then they sent him the bill. For 300 years, the most dangerous person in Rome wasn't across any border. He was standing outside the bedroom door, in armor, paid to be there. Here is the machine that produced this. And once you see it, all 7 of these deaths stop looking like separate tragedies and start looking like the same event, running on a loop. The Praetorian Guard was the only armed force legally allowed to be stationed inside the city of Rome. Everyone else, the legions, the real army, was kept out at the frontiers, on the Rhine, in Syria, along the desert. So the men physically closest to the emperor, the last ring of steel around his person, were also the only soldiers in a position to remove him. That is problem 1. Problem 2 arrives with the money. By custom, each new emperor, on taking the throne, paid the guard a bonus, a donativum, a thank you for their loyalty. Put those 2 facts side by side, and you get a self-canceling incentive. The guard got paid when the emperor changed. Stability paid them nothing. Change paid them a fortune. Nobody needed a grand conspiracy for this to turn lethal. You only needed a system that rewarded replacement and offered nothing for keeping a man alive. It began on a single afternoon in the year 41, and we'll get there because that afternoon set the price. One honest note before we start, and I'll keep this up throughout. A lot of what we know about these deaths comes from Roman historians writing to make a point, sometimes centuries later, sometimes with a grudge. Where a story is well attested, I'll tell you. Where it rests on a single unreliable source, I'll tell you that too. If that kind of thing is why you're here, the subscribe button is right there. We're counting down 7, worst documented first, saving for last, the one that proves the whole thing. We open with the strangest of them, because it's also the one built on the thinnest evidence. Aurelian was, by any measure, one of the most capable men to wear the purple in that entire century. He inherited an empire that had physically broken into 3 pieces, and, in about 5 years, stitched it back together by force. The Romans gave him a title for it, Restorer of the World. He was not a man you expected to die by accident. He had a secretary, a clerk named Eros, who got caught in a lie and understood that Aurelian was not the forgiving type. So the clerk did the math on his own survival, and reached for a pen. He forged a document, a list of names, officers the emperor supposedly meant to execute. He showed it to the men on that list, and they believed it. They didn't wait to check. On the road in Thrace, at a posting station, the officers who thought they were about to die killed him first. Then they found out the list was a forgery. There's nothing clever to say about that. One of the finest emperors of the age, the man who had just put the empire back together, was killed by a piece of paper with no truth on it, and by the reasonable, panicked logic of men who trusted the wrong clerk. Now, the honest part. The detail that the killers were later stricken with remorse comes mainly from the Historia Augusta, a source famous among historians for inventing exactly this kind of tidy, moralizing ending. Take the regret with salt. The forged list and the killing are on firmer ground, which tells you something bleak about how little it took. Not a plot, just a rumor that the payroll believed. If Aurelian shows you the danger of the men with swords, Domitian shows you the danger of the men with the trays. By the end, Domitian had made his own court terrified of him. Executions on suspicion. An atmosphere where the people closest to him went to bed, unsure they'd wake up accused. So the people closest to him did the arithmetic that fear always produces. It was him or them. The plot that killed him in the year 96 wasn't led by generals. It was the household. A chamberlain named Parthenius. A steward named Stephanus, who wore a bandage on his arm for days, faking an injury so he could hide a blade in the wrapping. When the moment came, in the emperor's own private rooms, the man he'd have waved through without a glance drove the knife in, and there was a struggle. And it was done. And the guard? Here's where I'll be straight with you. The Praetorians didn't carry out this one. But their commander, the prefect Petronius Secundus, was almost certainly in on it aware, and content to let it happen. That's the quieter version of the mechanic. The guard doesn't always need to strike the blow. Sometimes, it just needs to look away at the right moment. And a chamberlain with a trick bandage does the rest. The lesson costs nothing to state and everything to ignore. The threat to a Roman emperor didn't have to arrive in armor. It could arrive carrying the dinner. Commodus had spent years turning the dignity of the office into a personal hobby, fighting as a gladiator in his own arena, renaming the months of the year after himself, renaming Rome after himself. His inner circle had tolerated a great deal. What they could not tolerate was finding their own names on a list. Because near the end of 192, his mistress Marcia is said to have found a tablet in his rooms, the people he meant to have killed. She was on it. So was Eclectus, his chamberlain. So, crucially, was Latus, the prefect of the Praetorian Guard. The three people best placed to kill him had just been told they were next. They tried poison first, in his wine. He vomited it back up, he'd trained his body hard, and it saved him, briefly. So the plot reached for something surer. They sent in a wrestler. A young athlete named Narcissus, a man whose whole profession was applying force to another body, walked into the bath where the emperor was recovering and strangled him there. Draw the line carefully, because it matters for our count. The hands on his throat were an athlete's, not a soldier's. But the man who organized it, who made the decision and gave it cover, was the commander of the guard. This is the pattern tightening. We've gone from the guard believing a forgery, to the guard's commander allowing a murder, to the guard's commander arranging one. Each step, the fingerprints get clearer. Now the mechanic stops hiding, and shows you its teeth. After Commodus, the throne went to Pertinax, a serious, disciplined man who looked at the Praetorian Guard and saw exactly what it had become. Pampered, lawless, used to shoving citizens around in the street because no one stopped them, so he tried to stop them. He restored discipline. He curbed the privileges they'd grown fat on under Commodus. He also, and this is the part they never forgave, promised them a generous bonus, and then could only pay about half of it. The treasury Commodus left him was close to empty. So Pertinax gave the most dangerous armed men in the city two things at once: less freedom and less money than he'd promised. From the guard's point of view, he had broken the deal in both directions. He lasted 86 days. When a group of them marched on the palace, the accounts say Pertinax didn't run. He walked out to meet the soldiers and tried to reason with them, to remind them of order, of duty. It didn't take. They killed him where he stood. 86 days is the number to hold on to, because it's the whole thesis in miniature. A competent man tried to make the guard cheaper and better behaved, and the guard demonstrated, in under 3 months, precisely what that cost. And what they did in the hours after, I'll only say it's disgraceful enough to be its own video, and it is one. The short version. They didn't just replace the emperor. They auctioned the job. Galba had every reason to believe he'd already learned this lesson. He'd watched the system from the outside, and when he took power, he decided he would not be extorted by it. The guard had been promised a bonus in his name, promised by the man who'd helped him to power. Galba refused to pay it. His reasoning was, on paper, almost admirable. "I choose my soldiers," he said. "I do not buy them." It is a genuinely principled line about not letting armed men set the price of loyalty. It was also, as a personnel decision, a catastrophe. Because the guard didn't hear principle. They heard a man standing on top of the one lever that could kill him, announcing he wouldn't pay them for holding it steady. It took very little after that. A rival Otho quietly promised them the money Galba wouldn't. And when Galba realized the ground had shifted and went out into the forum to steady the city, he found he had no one. He was cut down in the open, in the heart of Rome, in daylight, roughly 7 months after he'd started. Galba is the control case in the experiment. Every other emperor here died for paying too little attention to the guard, or angering it, or being on its list. Galba died for the cleanest reason of all. He was asked for the bribe, he said no on principle, and the system killed him for the accounting. He was right about how a state should work. He was fatally wrong about the state he actually ruled. Which brings us back to that afternoon in the year 41, the one that set the price for everything you've just heard. Caligula had made a specific enemy inside the guard. A tribune named Cassius Chaerea, an older officer, a bit stiff, a bit formal, whom the emperor liked to humiliate for sport, mocking him as unmanly, handing him deliberately obscene passwords to carry to his men. Chaerea was a professional soldier being turned into a running joke by the man he was sworn to protect. That is a dangerous thing to do to the person standing next to you with a sword. In a narrow corridor beneath the palace, during the games, Chaerea and others closed in. They stabbed him many times, past the point of killing him, the way men do when they've been afraid of someone for a long time. And now watch what happens next. Because this is the birth of the whole machine. In the chaos afterward, guardsmen moving through the palace found Caligula's uncle Claudius hiding, by the tradition, behind a curtain, certain his own death was seconds away. They did not kill him. They realized what they were holding. A man who could be made emperor, by them, right now. They proclaimed him, and Claudius, to secure the men who'd handed him a throne he never fought for, paid each of them 15,000 sesterces. More than 10 years' wages for a common soldier, for a single day of being in the right corridor. That was the number that poisoned the next 3 centuries. Not because it was a bribe, Rome had bribes before, because it was a precedent. It established, in the space of an afternoon, that killing an emperor and installing the next one was the single most profitable thing the guard could do. Every death you've heard tonight is an echo of that transaction. And this is the one where the machine stops even pretending and just shows you the receipt. By 217, Caracalla was on campaign in the east, a hard, paranoid soldier's emperor who had murdered his own brother to rule alone. His Praetorian prefect was a man named Macrinus. And Macrinus, the story goes, learned that his own name had come up in a prophecy about the throne, the kind of thing that got you killed under an emperor like this one. He understood he was living on a countdown. So he did what the men in every other entry did. He moved first. He found his instrument in the emperor's own bodyguard, a soldier named Julius Martialis, who had a private grievance passed over for a promotion he wanted. On the road, the column stopped so the emperor could relieve himself. Caracalla stepped aside from his guards, briefly alone, briefly human. Martialis stepped forward as if to attend him and killed the most powerful man in the world beside a road, with his guard down in the most literal possible sense. The other bodyguards ran Martialis down and killed him moments later, which was convenient for everyone still standing. Now, the honest note, because it matters. Our sources agree Macrinus was behind it, but some of that certainty may be the victors writing the record. He had every reason to be blamed, and history is written by whoever's still breathing. Take the detail of his guilt as strong but not sealed. But here is the part that needs no source tiering, because it's not a rumor, it's a date on a calendar. 3 days after Caracalla died beside that road, the army hailed Macrinus the prefect, the man in charge of the emperor's protection, as emperor himself. 3 days. The person responsible for keeping the emperor alive was wearing his purple within 72 hours. Every other story in this list you could, if you squinted, explain as anger, or fear, or principle. This one has no such cover. The man who ran the emperor's security ended up with the emperor's throne, faster than a modern job posting stays open. If you wanted a single image of the entire 300-year problem, it's that, the bodyguard, over the still warm body, trying on the crown. So how does a system like this actually end? Not with better emperors. With one emperor finally treating the guard as what it was. In 193, the same chaotic stretch that ate Pertinax, a general named Septimius Severus marched on Rome, and instead of trying to buy the Praetorians or reform them, he simply abolished them. He disbanded the entire guard, stripped them of their ceremonial armor, and banished them from the city under pain of death. Then he built a new guard out of his own frontier, legions men loyal to him, not to the paycheck. He'd understood the real lesson. You cannot outbribe a body that profits from your death. You can only take away its power to collect. More than a century later, Constantine finished the job. After the guard backed his rival at the Milvian Bridge in 312 and lost, he dissolved it for good and tore down its camp. The most dangerous address in Rome was demolished, and the institution that had killed emperors for 300 years simply ceased to exist. Here's the through line, the thing all 7 men learned too late. For 3 centuries, the deadliest enemy of a Roman emperor was never across the Rhine or out in the Syrian desert. He wasn't a foreign king or a rival general. He was standing outside the bedroom door, in the emperor's own armor, drawing the emperor's own pay, a man hired for exactly one job, who slowly worked out that the job was worth far more if it kept coming open. If this is your kind of history, the mechanism under the murder, not just the murder, there are 2 more that pair with it. The 86-day aftermath I promised you, where the guard literally sold the empire, and the story of an entire disaster caused by nothing but bad information. Both are waiting. I'll see you in one of them.